whoever is basically
But now,
coming to DC.
what White House cleverly did, I wish I had a mole or a sleuth in the White House. Maybe Annette, maybe you can help me get one. What the White House cleverly did is that they just told the Kenyan side, akuna date, there are no dates available. Because they're the ones who release the dates. This is the date when we're receiving.
Yeah, this is when the president is,
when
available,
the president is available
to receive whoever you're bringing.
So there was no date availability before the state visit. So this guy could not come in as an ambassador. And before you're credentialed by the president, you are just a raia. You're nothing. You cannot. You cannot
you're a chap who works at the embassy.
Yeah, you're a chap who works at the embassy. You can't
Yes.
engage
Zero.
in any way, shape, or form. So that's something that tactfully America did. To come, there's more. There's definitely more to come, and that's why
But now
Biden,
with Uncle Joe being out,
now that's the curveball. This curveball wasn't expected. This curveball, Uncle Joe was betting on a 2-term presidency for Ruto, and Ruto was betting on a 2-term presidency for Biden,
where they could work,
where they could work
symbiotically.
together. Yeah, you remember even when. Moving on to a post-Biden presidency. Prior to all the chaos and protesting that's ongoing in Kenya right now, President Ruto was invited on a rare state visit to Joe Biden's White House. That was back in May. Now, we saw a raft of deals between Kenya and the U.S. signed in sectors including healthcare, climate change, trade and investment, and also debt sustainability. Now, more controversially, there were agreements on military partnerships to bring peace and security to Haiti and other counterterrorism operations. I think one of the operations that Kenya is already effective on right now is being able to try Houthi rebels if they're caught on the Red Sea. That's something that that was in progress. And then Kenya was also granted the status of a non-NATO ally. Then the U.S. government was also to provide financial, very controversially, financial and technical assistance to Kenya's Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission, a body that is currently not constituted, but the U.S. is already ready with money. Now, Annette, not to rope you in Kenyan politics, because I know you've been so engrossed with what's happening here, but what happens to such deals during transitions? You know, these gentlemen agreements between the U.S. and foreign governments, Biden and Ruto, that do not necessarily have the force of law. It's not a treaty. It's not something legal. It's just a gentleman's agreement and some documents signed. What typically happens to them during transitions? Let's say, on one hand, maybe if Kamala wins, or if on the other hand, if Trump wins, what is likely to happen to some of these Ruto-Biden deals, Annette?
We've already seen what happened. So when Obama was in office, he had agreements with certain countries. And just to kind of echo what you were saying, is this is not an official treaty. An official treaty would require Congress to agree on it. So the Senate would have to have, I think, 2/3 to agree for it. And then if not that, then, the process would continue however it continues. And so typically, that's not how things goes, because it's really tough to do that. But when it comes to being the president, you do have some latitude as far as like executive decisions that you can make. And so Ruto was definitely counting on a second Biden term.
Yeah.
And so that and I don't think that was a bad thing. I think that you should also look and see what happens if this doesn't continue, because here's the thing. Boots are on the ground in Haiti, okay? If Trump wins, and this is, if you are the president of Kenya, if Trump wins, then what happens? And is there a guarantee for the safety of your citizens should they need to evacuate? Because that's a hemispheric issue right there. Like that's one of the reasons why I didn't find that to be a wise choice, in addition to the fact that I don't think we have any business there. So basically, if the candidate goes,
all those deals
are left in the air. You're leaving it to chance. You are hoping now that somebody else who's a totally different person and will have a different agenda or different priorities, even if that's part of their agenda, you're hoping that they're going to prioritize you and that's just not a realistic.
And you know, the
thing to
interesting
do.
thing is that before Biden, when Trump was still president, there was a trade agreement, a permanent trade deal that was being negotiated between Kenya and the U.S. under Uhuru's presidency. But guess what Biden did when he came in? That was put on ice. You know, like the trade agreement, it's still there. The negotiations are still apparently going on, but there's been no movement. You know, some people thought that during this state visit is when it's gonna be signed, but that was a Trump deal, and that was gonna be a permanent trade agreement. The only other African country that has a permanent trade agreement with the U.S. is Morocco. You know, and Morocco is special to the U.S. because Morocco is one of the first countries to recognize the U.S. During American independence. You know, like the King of Morocco. Yeah, you know, it was one of the first countries to recognize the sovereignty of the U.S. So we've already been able to see what happens during transitions. But I think with this one was different because it was a state visit, and state visits are very rare. You know, these are not things that just happen, you know, like willy-nilly. The last time an African was hosted to a state visit, I think, was Ellen Sirleaf Johnson. And that was, I can't remember what year, but it was maybe 15, 16, 17 years ago.
So the
16.
Biden administration clearly had some interest in pivoting had some interest in Africa in general. They held the summit that happened in December. And so that's when, you know, not all, but most of the African countries were invited to come and sent delegations. And so that's not something that has happened. I think it was the last time something like that had happened, it was like 12 or so. It was more than a decade.
During Obama's time.
Yeah. So so you know, that was that's actually a big deal, you know, to have all of them come and invite them. And then, yes, to bring now for a state visit for that to happen again, that is also a big deal. However, it's always going to be about the U.S. interest first.
Correct.
You know? And so the U.S. interests are going to pivot based off of what's going on in the world at that time. And if it is not strategic and or beneficial to uphold some of these statements that are made, then it might not come. And there is some nuance there. And this is one of the reasons why I think it was very important for Ruto to continue doing his world tour that he was doing. And so now that has been halted with the demonstrations that are happening in Kenya, there is a huge dent on what he was trying to develop as a diplomatic prowess. And so now that it has been halted, it's going to prevent him from, I'm not sure what the agenda was, right? So it wasn't all vacations, right? There were some moves that he was trying to make
strategic
on
moves,
on a global scale. And so the fact that he has to be grounded at this point in time is really putting a damper on his ability to actually even offer anything on the international stage. So even if Biden were to continue, until this situation is handled, however that happens, it's going to be very difficult for Kenya to try and ask any favors right now.
So internationally, at least from an American perspective, you know, like Ruto should just stay where he is. He's not going to be able to make any moves because of what's currently happening back home.
I think that the United States has a history of shying away from situations when there is not some sort of domestic solvency. Like you have to have the ability to prove that whatever is being negotiated is going to actually, like, you're going to be able to follow through.
It's a good faith.
You know, and so if you're not able to follow through, then there's no point for the U.S. to get involved.
And the interesting thing is that since all this started, the American ambassador to Kenya, Meg Whitman, she's been missing in action, completely missing in action. She's not been seen.
She's
even the
by
statements
mouth.
being issued by the American embassy do not have her signature on it. You know, like, which is very telling.
She's convalescing.
Yeah, and she's the one who was all over the place with Ruto. You know, like, even when Ruto is coming to the U.S., she was here holding Ruto's hand, or go to Silicon Valley, go to Microsoft, go here, go there. She was the one who was kind of like
she set up
pulling.
the meetings.
But wait, Ali, you had a different name for her.
Oh, Meg Jepchirchir Whitman.
Okay.
Yeah. So she,
Then, Ali,
yes, Baker.
I have a different thought. because she's the one who was pushing Ruto everywhere and everywhere. And then we've seen the way the Gen Z demonstrations have been going on, and people have been calling out and have been calling out her name. Don't you think maybe she's just taking a step back to take away out of the limelight and let the wrath of the people fall on Ruto as she's pulling strings on the background?
I think she's been pulled over by the State Department.
I don't think so.
You can tell a halt.
Yes,
you can tell.
I think she's been pulled
There
over
are
because
signs.
when you look at previous messages that come from, because I had to go back and look at previous messages that came from the American embassy.
She always signed
she'd always sign it. It would always have a name, Ambassador Godek.
Or it would
Ambassador-
come from her office, like
Yes.
on her letterhead.
Yes. So interestingly enough, she was here, busy inviting people. When Ruto came here to the U.S., she was the one who was personally inviting people
Correct.
to engagements.
It was her
with Ruto.
it was her
It was
office,
her office.
that reached out to me. I have a letter from her. I have her email address. So
Which
yes,
was
so everything,
very unusual.
very active.
And very
Extremely
unusual.
So
Yeah.
kwa ufupi yenda nikupatia hiyo bahasha.
Very, very
Yes.
unusual.
You see?
Yeah. You see?
New info every week.
Yes. Me come with you.
Money.
So
Yeah.
and
Hiyo
it's,
pesa tutaifikia.
you can see also now the direct line between those visits and the companies that are mentioned in the statement that was released, right? So we're talking
Yes.
about tech opportunities with Microsoft,
Microsoft, yeah.
specifically, and with So these companies that are being named, they're not being named by accident. Even the education portion of it, there's supposed to be a relationship for STEM with Kenya and HBCUs here in the U.S. so that they can have, basically
Exchange
exchange
programs.
programs between Kenya and the United States. So that's very specific as well. Like that's very intentional. And so those are things. And then the money that is lined out for all of those projects, is also very intentional. So this was probably her baby. Like this was probably
The film industry, I can tell you that for sure. There's a program that was supposed to be happening in the film industry where there's groundwork being laid to kind of build world-class studio and all of that, facilitate, open Kenya up more for being the go-to location to shoot movies if you need an African background, as opposed to going to, say, Botswana
Or South Africa.
or SA is on the expensive side, but people still go there, right? Or was it Zimbabwe? I think so. Yeah, something. So instead of going to Botswana to do some of those, or Zimbabwe, or going to the southern part of Africa, Kenya is more in tune with what America would like because of just the environment. It has all of those things, but it doesn't have the robust industry that is needed. And Nigeria is just like out of the question. It's just not one of those things that they look at as in terms of I'm going to Africa to shoot in Nollywood.
Right. And
You know
now
what I'm
that
saying?
Biden has is not seeking re-election, there is no guarantee that Kamala Harris presidency means that she's still going to be in that post, because that's one of the things that gets reshuffled.
Or even honor.
So you're talking about like Meg Whitman.
So when it comes to the diplomats that are in different countries where they're sent, those are handpicked. Those are, and we've experienced it on the other end too, right? When we get a new president, the ambassador here changes.
Yeah.
We recently got surprised when we lost our friend. That was
presidential
Big Ted,
appointees
he was gone.
keep going.
So that thing is a very natural part of politics, right?
Yes.
And they understand that their role is completely tied to the political climate back home and to the favoritism that they may or may not have garnered with those who are making the decision.
So there's a possibility that we may never see Meg Whitman again in Kenya.
It is a possibility. It is at the pleasure of the president.
Correct.
Okay.
She serves at the pleasure of the president.
You know, I was listening to a former special envoy to Haiti from the U.S. His name is Dan Foote. And I don't know whether he was being sensational, but he said he walked out of the process because the idea he was claiming, and I'm going to use the word alleged. This is what he said in some podcast I was listening to. He said that the plan, to Haiti, it was actually using Kenya. It was Meg Whitman's idea. You know, he said it was Meg Whitman's idea, and him being a special envoy, he was asking, how does this make sense? You know, like where does Kenya come in? So when the idea was pushed, that's when he decided, okay, no, I'm gonna walk out of this process. You know, like I'm no longer gonna be part of this, because he said it wasn't making any sense. Why are we sending Kenya? What ties does Kenya have to Haiti? There's no common language. There's you know, like they're on the other side of Africa. There's no ancestral ties. There's nothing. Even if it's looking for a country to go there in place of America, it did make sense to pick Kenya. So I think these are some of the problematic parts. And we also remember that Meg Whitman, while the election was still being disputed in 2022, she had just been appointed brand new ambassador, no diplomatic experience, no experience in geopolitics, and she came out and said that this was the most free and fair election ever. And she just randomly came and said that. But now later on, seeing all these other things happening is when now people are coming to understand she may have been sent there as a business mercenary. Because you see, one thing that America was trying to do with Kenya, even with Trump's permanent trade agreement and these programs that Biden has, is America had identified Kenya as the center of where they want to experiment, of what they want to do in the rest of sub-Saharan Africa.
That's a very key word.
Yes.
Experiment.
Yes, it's an experiment. Experiment of what they want, how they want to counter China in Africa economically, and how they want to counter Russia in Africa geopolitically. So that's why Kenya was being given a lot of breadcrumbs, you know, take this, take that. But then what America was asking for was so big, like sending boots on the ground to Haiti. That's not a small thing.
That's
a blackface occupation.
And it's a little bit confusing because Kenya has had the privilege of being a little bit neutral, and so therefore you get to benefit from the relationships of all of the people who are. And the thing that is lost on me is you're in a strategic position when you are neutral like that, because you can say, okay, we're gonna have China come in and help us with this, and then we can, and then if Russia is doing this, we can do that with them, and then also the U.S. You know, Russia less so now, but in general, that neutrality benefits Kenya.
Yes.
So the moment you pick a side, you lose your opportunities. As far as, you know, other opportunities, as far as other trade deals or, you know, things that you've done in the past, they're no longer going to be offered to you in the future. And so I think what was happening was that you know, the United States has been, I guess, a bit consistent when it comes to certain things. And so maybe Ruto thought this is a safe bet to make, but nothing is safe. Like, times change, the leadership changes, and so if it's not a holistic thing, meaning that Congress is on board as well as the president, then, you know, the rest of the world understands that if Congress isn't enacting it, then it is just a piece of paper.
But what got me suspicious of this incestuous relationship between Biden and Ruto is when Biden gave him a shout out in a UN speech. American presidents don't just do that. You know, like he gave a shout out to Ruto, saying, you know, something that he's been a great leader, you know, like on this. And then he was also inserted in the top 100 on the Time magazine top 100 as I can't remember what list it was. Most 100 most influential leaders in the world. So Ruto was inserted there. And you know what people were saying? They were kind of priming him to give him a Nobel Prize for Haiti, because, you know, Ruto is trying to prop up his image globally. The other very suspicious thing on these arguments that they have with Kenya is the funding of the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission. Suspicion. I know America likes talking about China and Russia interfering in foreign elections. America is a very big interferer in foreign elections, and I think this is where they were securing their investment, making sure that Ruto has a second term. Because guess what America wants from Kenya? They want a military base. Because Russia was trying to secure, you know, like a military base in the Sudan, and that's part of the reason why there's a proxy war going on there between the US and Russia and so many other powers. And they were trying to exert their own geopolitical influence on that side of Africa to counter Russia. So there was a lot of problems. And then another thing I think is that I think America, one of the intelligence agencies, they must have a portfolio on this guy, on Ruto, because this guy lined up so fast. He was all about Pan-African wearing, like some ugly, poorly tailored counter suits. And then all of a sudden, when he became president, all of a sudden he's all American. Everything America wants, climate change, anything America wants, he's happy to do it. So I think there's a dossier they have on him. And they're telling him, you see this dossier over here. Remember, his case at ICC was suspended. It wasn't completely taken away. So I think they told him, dude, look, we're going to help you win a second term. You got to cut this, and this for us. Which is where sometimes, and now I'm moving towards the conspiracy realm. And this might be out of maybe watching, like a lot of CIA movies and stuff.
Sensational.
This guy might be, we don't know. And again, this is alleging. This guy might be an asset of an intelligence agency here in the US, and we don't know. Because the way he was lining up, it did not make sense at all. It wasn't making any sense. Now with this,
are you saying that because it has not naturally been him to kind of line that way? This was
no. What he was saying, like typically you wanna hedge your bets. You see, even Uhuru used to hedge his bets. He would work with the Chinese. He'd work, but this guy put all his eggs
in that basket.
Yeah, he put all his eggs in one basket, and then he was given a state visit, and then you're suddenly in a magazine, top 100 leaders in the world, and then shortly, remember even what the US did to Abiy Ahmed in Ethiopia? They gave him a Nobel Prize. Right now, Ethiopia is at war. It fell apart. There's some parts that want to separate themselves. So, to me, when Western countries become so good to an African leader, there's a reason why. It's not because they like you.
They always want something, they have something.
There's something very major they want.
My response to that is going to be, I believe that a key moment in history for African leaders was the passing of the Queen. And I say that because certain people went and certain people did not. So we shall see, I think, when history is written in the years to come, that's going to be a pivotal moment when it comes to some of the shift of the attitudes of the some of the diplomatic relationships and attitudes when it comes to former colonies of the Queen. Another thing that I would say is that what you are describing sounds very, very much like a couple of countries that I can think of. And so history has a tendency to repeat itself. Correct. And it always sounds crazy before the book comes out. Before the things, release. And I'm a big I like books, and so I go in and I have a collection of some things that might be very boring to many people, but to me it is riveting when it comes to some of these things that you are alluding to happening, because they do happen behind the scenes and we don't get to know about it until certain files become accessible to the public.
Become declassified. A good example is former Liberian president. He was a full-blown
Uncle Samuel Doe.
Yeah, not Samuel Doe. Charles Taylor.
Oh no, Charles Taylor was in Flint.
He was
trained
full
everything.
CIA asset. He was a prisoner in Massachusetts, and they crafted an identity for him as a guerrilla fighter and made him a president. And then when they were done with him, they dumped him and they left him for the ICC. And I don't know whether he's still in prison or whether he's still alive. So he was a CIA. This is declassified documents. I know Kenyan here was wondering why I'm going to conspiracy. He was saying conspiracy is the realm of Omosh. But these things, they are conspiracies. They are conspiracies until that's Kenyan Jui.
Do you want
That's Kenyan Jui. That's Kenyan Jui. That's not me.
Open the lines, please.
Again, the number to call is 202-683-4570. Press star 5 to speak. Now, Kenyan Jui was actually saying, I can't believe I'm putting my girl on blast like this. And I think this was a while back. But Annette, you cannot drop a stat like that and not back up with a source. So I can't remember exactly what you were talking about.
Oh, yeah. Tell me what you...
I think it's about
providing sources.
The Kenyans.
The Kenyans. The Kenyans. Oh, yeah. The Kenyans.
Okay, Let me find that.
So you can find that. I'll keep reading the other comments that were coming in. Oh my goodness!
I tried to look for it, but I think it's the way I was searching. My chat was not GPT.
Okay, Awar says Caswell is calling them pro-good governance protests, and then Awar says the U.S. Agency for international development. USAID also announced an additional $1.3 million youth empowerment program aimed at strengthening political engagement at the subnational level and $600,000 to advance disability inclusion. This is election interference. You know, like I hate saying this, but these are some of the subtle things that sometimes America does to sway votes. And then Joanne says the United States and Kenya announced a new $7 million partnership to advance and strengthen the modernization and professionalization of Kenya's National Police Service, with a focus on staff and training development. Now, National Police Service, remember our police has already been sent to Haiti. So
Correct.
This right here is a program to see if we can send Kenyan police in many other places that America wants us. So yes, and America has done
Ali,
this
you're
before.
still sticking with this Kenyan police.
Yes.
What is it called? Conspiracy.
No, it's these are things that are Kenya police is in Haiti. That's not conspiracy.
Yeah,
that's not
but
conspiracy.
basically, you remember, for you stuck with that ground of INI. This is just the beginning, and
Yes.
there's more to come.
There's more to come. There's definitely more to come, and that's why
But now
Biden,
with Uncle Joe being out,
now that's the curveball. This curveball wasn't expected. This curveball, Uncle Joe was betting on a two-term presidency for Ruto, and Ruto was betting on a two-term
two-term for-
presidency for Biden,
where they could work
where they could work together.
symbiotically.
Yeah, you remember even when symbolically Ruto went and sat in the Oval Office and
Yes,
Biden was
yes.
that was very horrible. I don't know whether Ruto understood, what kind of symbolism that showed. It showed that I'm your puppet master. I'm bringing you here, having you sit on my seat, smiling, and I'm gonna make you do anything you wanna do. I don't know whether he realized.
No, but
it,
for him, he
but
was
that's
just sitting.
horrible.
He was sitting in the so-called most powerful chair. I mean, it's just like it's like when we go to visit the UN and then we go over there in the podium.
That is horrible. Let me read some more here. Awar is dropping here some facts, I think, from the White House websites. He's saying that on combating corruption, the U.S. administration intends to provide $500,000 for a new fiscal integrity program to make county budget processes more transparent and inclusive and increase citizen engagement, and $500,000 to broaden the reach and effectiveness of anti-corruption advocacy by empowering civil society actors to create and disseminate multimedia content that engages citizens and mobilizes action against corruption. To support the government of Kenya to combat corruption, the administration is providing $250,000 from the Global Accountability Program and $300,000 to support Kenya's proposed whistleblower protection law to strengthen Kenya's anti-corruption legal architecture. In addition, USAID has provided $2.7 million to support the improved enforcement of policy and laws that deal with fraud, waste, and abuse in the delivery of public services to Kenyan citizens. That's too much stuff, which there are those agreements that are not written.
Yes.
There's the written part, then there are those ones that are reached, like in back rooms.
Yeah, I think the one that was just announced was on for whistleblower. I think Ruto announced that one. Was it Jana or Leo? The whistleblower one.
Yeah. Okay, that I've not heard.
Yeah, to get people who basically are whistleblowing to be protected and so on and so forth.
The
That's
thing
kind of
is,
where that money is coming from. Go ahead, Mika.
the thing is, if you've noticed, a lot of this money that you're getting it comes tied up with social issues, and usually when they do that, what we look at is we start discussing and arguing about the social issues that have been tied to this money. Because there was also some money which was coming that was supposed to be tied up into policies based on LGBTQ, and then there was also some that were coming in based on policies of carbon footprints. Then there was some that were coming in on basis of human rights and corruption. These are the things that will get people talking, and we'll see at it. And then we forget to look at what, as Alia said, Ruto gave up when he was giving Biden. So there's a lot of small loans that were given in this agreement, dealing with healthcare, human rights, climate change, and at the end of the day, it was a business deal that was not serving Kenya in any way. Even the reforms that were coming in for the police, if you say you want to reform the police in Kenya, what are the first two things you're going to do? You're going to improve the housing, you're going to improve the training, you're going to improve the salaries. Never have you seen, even in this thing that they're saying they're trying to modernize and everything, nobody has come up with a clear instruction on how they're improving it. They're not being trained how to handle crowd control, they're not being trained how to handle certain issues. They're not being trained they're not being improved in any way. They're not being improved in ways on how to handle certain attack scenarios. That is why we have a Westgate, whereby 3 terrorists will hold off more than 700 police for hours because they don't have that specialized training on how to handle certain things. So the deals were bad, regardless of how you look at them. And Ruto, at this point, will have to do a lot of shuttle diplomacy. The ambassador that he employed over here, the new one, will have to convince whoever comes in power why this deal should continue.
Wow. You know, and this is Mika, this is where, unfortunately, you know, the way Gen Zs back home were checking, you know, like credentials and qualifications of some of these people in office. We need to hire them to start checking people who are being given diplomatic appointments, because we saw them being vetted by parliament and they were very useless. Has
that even arrived?
No, I don't even know if he's arrived. So no diplomatic experience. He hasn't arrived here yet. So America tactfully, you know, like one of my sleuths, my moles, informed me that this is from a mole or a sleuth. They had informed me that President Ruto, because remember how Big Ted, and Big Ted needs to come and tell us his story. Remember Big Ted?
Yes.
And I think this is season for revelation, which is why we should reveal these things. Remember how Big Ted worked so hard in mobilizing people, you know, just as he's supposed to be to go to attend the programs that President Ruto was supposed to be hosting out here in the US. And then Big Ted left for Kenya. He was supposed to come back, but guess what? Big Ted never came back. So
I was with him in Kenya, actually.
Yes, Mika was actually with him in Kenya at that time when he was supposed to be here. So President Ruto wanted his people on the ground by the time when he was coming.
Yes.
But you see, if you're a new ambassador, you don't know the lay of the land.
Yeah.
And I think America very tactfully did not, because usually for an ambassador to be approved, they have to go to the White House to get those credentials.
Yes.
You have to present. You have to present your paperwork to the sitting American president.
To the sitting American president.
Whoever is basically coming to DC.
What White House cleverly did, I wish I had a mole or a sleuth in the White House. Maybe Annette, maybe you can help me get one. What the White House cleverly did is that they just told the Kenyan side akuna date. There are no dates available, because they're the ones who release the dates. This is the date when we're receiving.
Yeah, this is when the president is available to receive whoever you're bringing.
So there was no date availability before the state visit. So this guy could not come in as an ambassador, and before you're credentialed by the president, you are just a raia. You're nothing. You cannot.
You're a chap who works at the embassy.
Yeah, you're a chap who works at the embassy. You can't engage in any way, shape, or form. So that's something that tactfully America did. So right now, I don't know whether the current ambassador has come. Because
Amaya has already been
Amaya
has been reassigned.
Amaya is out.
Right? He's been reassigned.
So I think,
which country did he go to?
He went to the EU.
No. He's been. I don't know where he's been reassigned.
But he's left. You're right.
Right now, I think we just have a chargé d'affaires who's in charge. So we don't have an ambassador.
We have a Jin Kamau.
Now, back to what Mika said. This guy who's coming is the one who is supposed to convince let's say the Kamala Harris White House, or God forbid the Trump White House, that these deals that we signed up here
are very good for you.
This is a guy, no diplomatic experience, no geopolitical experience. He was unable to survive the panel, the vetting panel that had Kamkunji MP, Yusuf Hassan, who was really grilling them to the core. So I don't know how they'll go sit across the table with State Department officials on the other side, with White House officials on the other side, those guys are going to crucify them.
In effect,
He's going to get crucified.
In effect, Ali has put a nail on our coffin to have the guy come here to talk to us about diplomacy and Kenya and embassy and everything.
No, he doesn't. These people.
I mean,
I don't think Ali wants that guy to come.
Let me tell you, these people. This is the problem that's happening in Kenya.
Yeah.
This is a problem that's happening in Kenya. This guy, his experience, he's been a speaker in some county in Rift Valley, Bomet County.
What's his name, by the way?
He's, I think, David Lagat. Something like that. The
namesake.
He's part of President Ruto's tribe, which is what's happening, especially diplomatic appointments. This is where political failures are appointed. This is where tribesmen are appointed. This is where girlfriends and boyfriends are appointed. This is where children are appointed. Remember, President Ruto's daughter was in Poland as a chargé d'affaires, and right now she's a director somewhere, some defense department or something.
The Minister of Defense.
Yes, look at that. And this is the problem that's happening in Kenya, whereby you have all these unqualified people in these spaces, and then when they're now negotiating on behalf of Kenya, we end up getting breadcrumbs.
Breadcrumbs, my friend. We're not getting even breadcrumbs.
We end up getting
shafted
proper, and we are giving up. We're giving up so much, which is why
we are giving up our children's future.
Which is why I strongly believe there's something that these guys have on Ruto, because the way he lined up 100% without even hedging his bets is just so spectacular. So those are things that we're gonna see.
Yeah.